I'm Dr. Angus Nurse, and the main project I work on is called Policing Wildlife. And what it really does is it looks at the enforcement of wildlife law, and it looks at wildlife crime. And wildlife crime is one of the largest areas of crime globally. It tends to come maybe after drugs and weapons, sometimes maybe after drugs, weapons, human trafficking, depending on how you look at it. What we're really talking about when we're looking at wildlife crime is we're looking at a whole range of things. What's probably most known is wildlife trafficking, so the illegal exploitation of wildlife. So we're looking mostly at things like wildlife trafficking, the illegal trade in rhino horn, the illegal trade in ivory, killing of big cats and so on for their fur and their skins. But we can also be looking at things closer to home, like illegal egg collecting or the trade in taxidermy items. And what the Policing Wildlife project has really done is it's looked at different aspects of the illegal trade in wildlife, different aspects of wildlife crime. And one of the things that we've done with Policing Wildlife is to look at the law first of all, because one of the things that is often said about wildlife crime is that we need to actually improve wildlife law and make them tougher. Well, actually, in some areas, what our research has found is that the law is actually fine. It's the enforcement that's a problem. So in most countries, wildlife crime falls outside the remit of the main criminal law. So it's not necessarily a police priority. It might be dealt with by conservation agencies. It might be dealt with by specialist environmental regulators. And part of what Policing Wildlife does is it says, well, actually, this is an area of crime and criminal activity, so it needs to be considered in that way. One of the principles that we talk about in criminology, the main area I work in, is what we would call deterrence theory. The idea that people can be deterred from crime if they are aware of a penalty and they fear that the penalty is going to be imposed. So a certain knowledge of a certainty that you're going to get caught, you're going to get prosecuted, and you're going to get sentenced. Well, the reality for some wildlife crimes is that you don't really fear those penalties, because if you are caught, that's a big if, given that a lot of these things happen in remote areas. They happen in areas where there aren't routine police patrols. Then you're relying on prosecution. Well, in some areas, wildlife crimes are not rigorously prosecuted. And then there is that question of, are you actually going to receive that sentence? Do you actually think that you're going to be sentenced and you're going to maybe go away for a long time? If you weigh that up against the money that can be made in wildlife crimes, then you might actually reason that it's worth the risk, particularly in a country where the enforcement is carried out largely by non-governmental organisations or conservation wardens rather than the mainstream police.